Do you guys want us to put our name in the chat?
Sure. Yep.
Jen, is your information already shared in the chat?
I'm putting it in right now.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, I think we can go ahead and get started.
Excellent. All right, well, welcome everybody. My name is Heather Mayfield. I'm an ORBA board member and vice chair of the Foundation for Ohio River Education. We are a nonprofit educational foundation originally formed by Orsenko. So I'd like to welcome you to today's Ohio River Discussion Series February webinar, Turning Science into Stories, Connecting People to Water Quality and the Environment. And this presentation will feature our speakers, Elizabeth Burton, Glenn Delaney, and Dakota Duff. So welcome, everyone. Just a few housekeeping items. We do ask that you keep your camera and your microphones off. This helps to keep our signals streaming smoothly and hopefully keep our presenters from having their signals freeze or glitch. We do have a tight schedule for today's session, so we'll be taking questions at the end of our presentation. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. Jen Bowman, who is our ORBA Kid Workgroup lead and our session moderator today, will monitor the chat, and she'll make sure that your questions get to the speakers. Today's session is being recorded and will be uploaded to YouTube. So a link will hopefully be emailed out to all of our registrants within the next couple of weeks. And finally, if you're interested in suggesting a future topic or being a featured speaker or getting more involved in planning these webinars, please reach out to Jen Bowman. She has shared her contact information in the chat. All righty. So as I mentioned before, my name is Heather Mayfield, and I am representing the Foundation for Ohio River Education, or FOR. FOR is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that was originally formed by the Ohio River Valley Water Sanitation Commission, or ORSANCO. FOR focuses on teaching people in the Ohio River Basin to become environmental stewards through hands-on experiential programs focused on citizen science and water monitoring, educator development, river cleanups, and other outreach activities designed to connect learners of all ages in the Ohio River, or connect learners of all ages with the Ohio River and its watershed. So Orsenko is ORBA's fiscal sponsor, and since 1948, Orsenko and its member states have cooperated to improve water quality in the Ohio River Basin, ensuring that the river can be used for drinking, industrial supplies, and recreational purposes, and that the Ohio River can support a healthy, diverse aquatic community. Orsenko operates monitoring programs to check for pollutants and toxins that may interfere with specific uses of the river. Orsenko, as mentioned before, is an interstate pollution control agency, and it's made up of commissioners from 8 states and the federal government. And you can see these states featured here on the maps. So Orsenko's programs, again, improve water quality in the river and its tributaries. Some of these programs include setting wastewater discharge standards, performing biological assessments, monitoring for chemical and physical properties of the waterways, and conducting special surveys and studies. Orsenko also coordinates emergency response activities for spills or accidental discharges. Orsenco is governed by state and federal commissioners that act as Orsenco's board of directors and receives funding through US EPA and its member states. It carries out its mission with a small but mighty staff of 22 employees and a vast network of numerous agency and organizational partners, many of whom may be on here today. So we thank you for being part of this webinar. And at this point, I'm going to go ahead and pass things over to Jen, who will introduce ORBA and our speakers. Thank you, Jen.
Thanks, Heather. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining the Ohio River Basin Alliance discussion series. ORBA is a collaborative of stakeholders with a united voice for the Ohio River Basin, consisting of 14 states with over 500 members working to sustain a healthy ecosystem and vibrant communities within the basin. I'd like to thank our chair of ORBA, Chris Lorenz with the Thomas More University, and our past chair, Craig Butler, with the Muskingum Watershed Conservancy District. ORBA has been working diligently on the legislation for the Ohio River Basin Restoration Initiative with Jordan Lebekin with the National Wildlife Federation and many other stakeholders, of which many of you are on the call here today. My name is Jen Bowman. I'm the Director of Environmental Programs at Ohio University's Voinovich School of Leadership and Public Service, and also the working group lead for ORBA's Knowledge and Education to Inform Decisions working group. So I will introduce our first speaker here. We have Elizabeth Burton with the Foundation for Ohio River Education. I'm going to pull up her bio here. Her title of her presentation is Engaging Communities with through Hands-On Water Science. Elizabeth is an outreach specialist with the Foundation for Ohio River Education, leading the River Watchers volunteer monitoring program and connecting communities to hands-on river stewardship across the Ohio River Basin. She holds a BS in biology from the University of Louisville. Thank you, Elizabeth, for being here. And I'm going to turn this over to you. Thank you.
All right. Hi, guys. My name's Elizabeth. I am the outreach specialist at the Foundation for Ohio River Education. So I'm just gonna walk you through some of the things that I do to engage communities through hands-on water science. Like Jen said earlier, I'm involved in the citizen science. I lead the citizen science at the Foundation. So I'm just going to show you guys a few of the things that we do and some of the feedback we've gotten from people who work with us. So the citizens part of the citizen science. So River Watchers is our volunteer monitoring program throughout the Ohio River Basin. So we apply to grants, we get chemical test kits. So it has phosphate, nitrate tests, dissolved oxygen tests, E. coli, turbidity, pH, all sorts of different water quality chemistry tests. And then we also provide them a macroinvertebrate kit. So it has bins, some scrapers, it has macroinvertebrate ID sheets, it has macro lenses, but we deliver these to schools around the basin. This past year, we added schools in Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Kentucky, and Ohio. So I went to the schools and I presented them with their kit. I gave them a training. So the teachers and the students, I trained them on how to use it. And then they get to go out and they get to do their very own water quality testing. So not only is this good for them, but we, like Heather said earlier, Orsenco has a small but mighty staff of 20 employees, and 4 only has like 4 employees. So we rely on these people to be our watchdogs of the Ohio River Basin. So their data gets reported back to us. So we go through it, the Orsenco scientists go through it, and they make sure that nothing looks weird in the tributaries or the little creeks that they're going out and monitoring. If something does, then we will actually go out there with our very expensive and fancy equipment and test it ourselves. But they have a real world application with this. So it's really, really cool. I got a quote from the Pendleton County High School teacher. Pendleton County's in Northern Kentucky. That's one of the Kentucky schools that we added this past year. And she I actually went to their water quality field trip with them. And she pulled me to the side and she told me that she had never seen some of her students focused and involved like they were that day. Like some of these students, she's like, they're the quote unquote bad kids that never pay attention, always acting up. But that day, those were the kids that were out in the water actually doing all of the tests while some of the other kids were just hanging out on the shoreline. But the bottom picture here is just some of the kids at Pendleton County just getting in the water. This was the Licking River that they were testing. So they were out in the river looking for macroinvertebrates at this time, but they were out getting involved as they could, and doing all of the water chemistry tests and the macroinvertebrate tests. So they very much enjoyed it. We also, this top picture here came from Pennsylvania. We had students from Carmichael Area High School. They placed, I believe, third in the Pennsylvania Envirothon, which if you're not familiar with the Envirothon, it's almost like a science fair type of event, but you're trying to do like science outside. So it's research based. And every single student that placed and participated with the River Watchers kit received a scholarship. So these are just a few ways that River Watchers is able to connect these students, not just to the Ohio River, but to better education or to like learning something with hands-on learning instead of just sitting and reading a book. So we really, really like River Watchers. We also have our Ohio River Conservation course. This is a partnership between us for Ohio River Foundation, the Thomas More Biology Field Station, and Sanitation District 1. This goes on for 1 week every single summer. This year, we have the Bosch Foundation is helping us to provide 10 scholarships to low-income students who would not otherwise get this opportunity. So I have a quote here on the screen from one of the students in our first year of the Ohio River Conservation course. This only was 2 years ago, so it's fairly new, but we take them out to do weeding of invasive plants. And they were so happy with it. They loved it. It was fun, an opportunity to bond with the other kids in the camp because most of them just come from around the basin. So they don't even know each other. And then he has been inspired to volunteer and remove some more invasive species. So that was really cool to hear that we had that impact on them. Not just a way for them to help out with conservation in their own life, but also just to let them have friends across the basin who are also interested in similar things. A lot of these kids are high school students, so this is a good way to show them different job opportunities or different like college majors that they could go to. And every year we give these students a post survey, and all of them said that they had a better understanding of the importance of watershed conservation after they came to the summer camp. And most of them said that they were inspired to help make a change in their local environment. So we have had some students come back and just say how much this has helped them, with college decisions, what they want to do in life, all of that fun stuff. Also, we are starting to accept applications for this summer, so if you have a high schooler at home who might be interested in attending, feel free to visit this website at the bottom. Life Below the Waterline is our mobile aquarium. It's 2,200 gallons. We fill it with locally caught fish, which are returned to their habitat after each event. And every time we do that, since we have to catch them locally, it's different fish in there. So in this particular event, well, a lot of people who come to these events have never seen fish from their close water body. So we did this event at America's River Roots in Newport and Cincinnati this past year. So many people were coming up to us and just so surprised at the fish in the Ohio River. This helps change their perception of the Ohio River. A lot of people did not know that there were fish in the river. And if they did have fish in the river, they were like, thought they had three eyes or, crazy mutations, instead of just looking like normal fish. So it's really cool just to be able to show people how healthy the water is and change their perception a bit and make them want to make it better. But then this top picture here, this was from West Virginia last year. This was a little boy who came, we had a community event in Morgantown, and he came probably 3 or 4 times that day, just awestruck by the fish in the aquarium. And so we told him, please come back during breakdown, like you would love to see it. So during breakdown, there's a little baby gar, which is what I'm holding. Gar, fairly tame. They don't really mind being held. So I got him out and let the kid pet him. And the kid absolutely loved it. He came to the boat ramp with us, saw us release all of the fish into their habitat. And his grandparents came up to me afterwards and they were like, oh my goodness, thank you so, so much. Like, this kid, he loves being outside, he loves the nature. We can't afford to get him a pet fish, but we're just so happy that he had this experience. Like, I know he's going to talk about it forever. And so that was just very nice to be able to do that for him. And for all of the people in the Ohio River Basin, and just see how their perception changes. And then the Ohio River Sweep, many of you have heard of this. A lot of you helped with our October 4th event this past year. So thank you again for helping us with that. We're actually getting ready for our new season, which is starting this coming Sunday on March 1st. So feel free to register for a sweep. But we have people all around the basin who have been doing this for many, many years. Some people, I've gotten some feedback from people who have been doing it for 27 years, and they just say every year it gets better. So they're so thankful to be able to clean up their community. And some people even make it a community-wide effort. So this guy here, all of these pictures are from a guy named Todd. Todd lives up in Meigs County, Ohio. And he does a whole community event. Like, they have raffles, they have food, drinks. We have our own sponsors for the Ohio River Sweep, but then they go out and get local sponsors, like their local bank. So they go crazy with the Ohio River Sweep, but it's something that they look forward to every single year. The whole community gets involved, so they had 140 volunteers just at their community event. And they gave away $2,000 in giveaway gifts. So this is something that it's not just Todd that's doing this. There's a bunch of people out there with the Ohio River Sweep who put on these community events. But it's just really cool to be able to be a part of that impact and to help them host these events. Because even though they could do it on their own, we're just able to make it that much easier to keep the Ohio River litter free. But yeah. So that's all that I have. Do you guys have any questions?
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Yeah, of course.
I actually want to, maybe we'll hold questions till the end.
Oh, okay,
So
yeah.
we can go through all of the presentations, and or feel free to use the chat to put your questions in, and we can take those at the last 5 to 10 minutes of the webinar.
Perfect.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth.
Yeah.
I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Glenn Delaney. He's a project director and the director of partnerships at Earth Economics, a nonprofit with a mission to quantify and value nature for better decision making. He has led valuation of diverse ecosystems for salmon habitat restoration in Washington to the greater Everglades. Previously, Glenn was a was a British commercial officer in San Francisco, supporting the UK's climate agenda during the COP26, and the policy officer in the UK's Ministry of Justice. I can see your slides, Glenn, so feel free to take it away.
Thank you. I don't think I've been a bishop, but I could be wrong. Um, so, Glenn Delaney, nice to meet you all. Earth Economics is a nonpartisan environmental economics research nonprofit. We're based in Tacoma, Washington, but are remote like a lot of folks. So I'm based in Columbus, Ohio. And our updated mission is to articulate nature's value to support informed decision making and create a future where the well-being of people and the natural world are prioritized. But really, we're using economic analysis to tell a story about why it's important to protect and restore nature. And I'm sure most people on the call are familiar with ecosystem services. They are benefits created by nature. They're generally divided into four categories: provisioning, what we can extract responsibly from nature on an annual basis; regulating, how ecosystems maintain equilibrium through things like soil quality, water quality, flood regulation; support for biodiversity through habitat; and then community or information services, how we interact with ecosystems through beautification, which improves property prices, recreation, and even cultural use in specific circumstances. And many of these benefits are non-market. No one pays to receive them, but we know inherently that they have value. We'd rather live next to an acre of forest than an acre of parking lot, even though that parking lot creates revenue through people parking there. We want to recreate in that forest. We don't receive the stormwater runoff from the parking lot with the forest. Our house prices increase. And ecological economics allows us to include that non-market value of nature within decision making. So we can compare environmental and social benefits and costs to traditional economic benefits and costs, doing this kind of dollar to dollar, apples to apples comparison of different projects or alternatives that emit or include nature-based solutions. And we can tell stories with that valuation. So recently, we've been using valuation to tell a story to legislators to help them understand and articulate why funding protection and restoration of nature is a good investment for their constituents. And so we did this very high level valuation of the 69 million acres of natural lands across the Ohio River Basin to support ORBA and the efforts around the Ohio River Restoration Act. So we valued 11 ecosystems across 9 land cover types and found they create about $50 billion in benefits every year when fully functioning. And last year, the Nature Conservancy asked us to analyze Ohio's H2 Ohio program, which funds wetland restoration and agricultural best management practices to mitigate harmful algal blooms in Lake Erie. In 2025, Governor DeWine sought about $270 million to fund the program. It's his flagship program, his legacy. But unfortunately, only $165 million were appropriated. And the Nature Conservancy wanted to understand and articulate if the investment in H2 Ohio is money well spent. They were interested in the value of those non-market benefits, but also the ripple effect of the program spending in Ohio's economy. And through our analysis, we found that whilst H2 Ohio doesn't generate revenues, it delivers broad benefits for Ohio's people and economy. If you heard HABs, harmful algal blooms in Lake Erie, and thought, what does this have to do with the Ohio River Basin? Well done. But as you can see, although wetland projects are clustered along the Maumee River in the Lake Erie Basin, the program is statewide, and there are projects scattered across the Ohio River Basin as well. And we divided our analysis into 2 parts: wetland restoration and agricultural best management practices. The Nature Conservancy provided a database of the planned, in progress, and completed wetland projects. And that included things like the location, the acres restored, the project costs. So as of June 2025, 2025, there were 458 completed or in progress wetlands. But using the data they provided, we based our analysis on 183 wetlands in progress or completed by mid-2024. And we use what's called the benefit transfer approach. So we used existing studies and transferred values across to value the 11,000 acres of restored wetlands. And we use what's called a statistical function reported in a global study, which had reviewed 170 wetland valuation studies across 186 wetland sites, including within the Ohio River Basin. So that's kind of more robust and ecosystem-specific version of the model we used to value the whole basin. And the authors of this function developed a meta-analysis to estimate the value of 13 services across 6 wetland types. 5 explanatory variables allows us to give a really high resolution estimate that vary by context. So we get a unique value to each wetland patch. And those variables are wetland type, wetland size, wetland abundance within 50 kilometers, population density, which is really key because valuation is anthropocentric, and then the magnitude of human presence or pressure. So 7 out of 13 services are relevant to Ohio wetlands. That's flow control and storm buffering, water supply, water quality improvement, hunting, low impact recreation, amenity and aesthetics, that's property price improvement, and habitat and biodiversity. And the results of this function transfer model estimated that those 11,000 acres of wetlands generate around $300 million in public value annually. More than half of that value comes from 2 services, habitat and biodiversity, which create around 80 million and benefit nearly 90% of the state's population, and then water quality and supply improvements, which together contribute around, again, $80 million each year. So when we compare those benefits to Ohio Department of Natural Resources investment, which is about $30 million per year, for every $1 Ohio spends on wetlands, residents receive about $8 worth of benefits. And then alongside the ecosystem services valuation, we also conducted what we call beneficiary mapping, which allows us to identify which populations are actually benefiting from these services. And more than 11.38 million residents across 87 of Ohio's 88 counties benefit, along with about 1.4 million residents in neighboring states. We also evaluated the economic impact of the wetlands restoration, what's called the ripple effect. We use something called an input-output model, which measures how spending circulates through local economies. And that model estimates the direct effects from industries involved directly on the restoration work, the indirect effects, which is from businesses that supply goods and services to those primary industries, and then induced effects, which is household spending by workers whose income depends on that activity. And every year, H2 Ohio wetland restoration projects support over 270 jobs, generate more than $80 million in labor income. And these projects add over $27.9 million in value to Ohio's GDP, generating at least $48 million in economic output each year. So wetland restoration doesn't only provide environmental benefits, but the act of restoring them creates significant economic returns across the state, delivering about an average of $2.16 in economic impacts for every dollar invested. And then we also looked at the agricultural best management practices. Again, we used 2024 data. The average annual cost of the BMP program was $27 million. And in 2024, it prevented about 420,000 pounds of phosphorus from entering waterways, both in Lake Erie and in the Ohio River Basin. And our analysis focused on HAB reduction specifically, so Lake Erie, and water quality. And it's an underestimate because it excludes other services like the improved soil health or the value practices like improved nitrogen management. We valued ag BMPs through avoided impacts to property values, charter boats revenue. We looked at healthier communities and fewer costly cleanups, better fishing and swimming, healthier drinking water, and cleaner water. And you'll notice some of these ranges are quite large. We use several approaches for some of these values. So if you look at the healthier communities and fewer costly cleanups, you can see that it ranges from $33,000 to $24 million. And that's because the lower estimate was based on scaling health costs associated with the 2014 Toledo water crisis, 2 incidences reported through the National Outbreak Reporting System. And the incidences reported and attributed to HABs are quite low, so we have a low value. Whereas the higher estimate was based on a CDC study of respiratory and digestive symptoms following the outbreak. And then those healthcare costs were scaled to counties where the microcystin levels in raw water exceeded the levels during the 2014 crisis. So it gives a kind of projection for what we think the actual healthcare damages were. And that value is much higher across all those counties' populations. So we reported the average of those two methods. And these methods represent the avoided cost per contamination event that couldn't be directly scaled by phosphorus reduction. So there are some caveats to our numbers. The total of those benefits was $32 million each year, compared to the $27 million in average annual cost, which yields a return of $1.21 for every dollar invested. So the story our partners want to tell is that H2 Ohio is a great use of funds that benefit millions of Ohioans. And the key takeaways from the economic analysis to support that story are that every dollar Ohio invests in wetland restoration returns at least $8 in non-market public benefits. So that's cleaner water, flood protection, wildlife habitat, recreation, and more. For every $1 spent on agricultural BMPs, Ohio receives at least $1.21 in benefits through healthy communities, higher property values, and better fishing and boating. And again, that's linked to the harmful algal blooms in Lake Erie, so the value is probably much greater, particularly across the basin. H2 Ohio projects prevent phosphorus from entering Ohio's waterways through 3,200 enrolled farmers, but then also from the wetlands restoration. Wetland restoration supports over 270 jobs each year, supports at least $48 million in the state's economy, and generates millions in tax revenue. Nearly 90% of Ohioans benefit out of 87 of 88 counties, including 1.4 million folks from neighboring states. And this economic analysis demonstrates that H2 Ohio is a proven, cost-effective investment. So there's a full 40-page report which lays out the methodology and then a 7-page summary fact sheet. We think this approach can be used practically in other states, and we are using it in other states in the basin. So we're currently working in Tennessee, where isolated wetlands under 2 acres have been deprotected. So I'll share that when it comes out.
Thank you, Glenn. I'm interested to know what that one county is, but we'll get to that later. I want to introduce our next speaker here, Dakota Duff with Virga Labs. Thank you, Dakota, for filling in for Susan Martin, who could not be with us today, also from Virga Labs. So Dakota is going to talk about the art and data for action, kind of transforming complex data into engaging solutions for critical climate issues. Dakota has over 20 years of experience in IT and cloud operations. He leads the technology and operations at Virga Labs, where he architects data platforms, decision support tools, and web applications that support climate resilience and water planning. He's passionate about designing resilient systems, simplifying complexity, and supporting teams that make meaningful impact through technology. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the introduction. I'm as introduced, I'm filling in for Susan Martin today, so I'll try and keep within time limits and everything and leave plenty of time for questions. We're a small firm. Virga Labs is a small firm specializing in digital communication related to water issues. Company's based in Tucson, Arizona. I'm based in Boulder, Colorado, so joining from a few time zones away. And when we talk about what we're trying to do with art and data and storytelling, create action with people, one of the issues that we observe regularly is what we call a data deluge, which is the flooding of data that has happened over the past several years. It certainly can be illustrated in many ways, but I think that we all can feel that we're drowning in data, but at the same time starving for understanding. So, over the past several decades, more and more data, but it seems like in many cases less and less understanding of that data, and then also growing misinformation and pieces of information that are making it harder for people to actually glean understanding from the data that does exist. One of the things, this is an old slide, as you can tell here, it has 2024, 2025, and 2026 as kind of these future periods. But even 3 years ago, there was just this explosive growth in data. And there was going to be more data made by 2026, the year that we're in now, than in all of preceding human history in terms of the amount of data being generated. And looking at this graphic now and knowing that this was put together, before we kind of entered the modern, the last couple of years of AI generated data and charts and graphics and all sorts of news articles and things like that. I wouldn't be surprised at all if the actual data here is even exploding at a higher rate than this illustration shows. One of the things that is a problem with this data deluge issue and just the amount of data that are being presented to people is that it leads to inaction instead of action. So often data is being produced with the idea that it would and should create action from people, but a lot of times what happens because the amount of data is actually the opposite. There are four key things that can happen here. One is just cognitive overload at the amount of data being presented. One is anxiety about the potential effects of the data or trying to understand the data. There's cognitive fatigue that can set in with people, illustrated here by kind of the trained battery, right? There's so much data, so much information, trying to make sense of it can be difficult. And then avoidance behavior, where you get to a point where you may feel like, or others may feel like, your audience may feel like, there's so much information that like I just can't even deal with this, so head in the clouds type of thing. There's also an issue with accessibility of data. So I'm going to flip through a couple of slides here somewhat quickly because they're just trying to show that data can be very disconnected from decision making. So these are just some charts that have been pulled from various places. Some of them are interesting to look at in terms of what the chart looks like, but it's often difficult to actually glean a message and glean some understanding from the information and the way it's being presented. So the point here of this first section is that data and consuming data is not really the way that humans were built to understand things. And presenting more information does not mean that you're getting people closer to meaning or to understanding. And that's where, for us, the power of digital storytelling can come into play and come into effect. So with digital storytelling, what that means for us, and it can mean different things for different organizations, but for us, we are primarily focused on building digital tools. So websites is how most of our content is delivered, that create powerful narrative, multimedia experience, interactivity that really gets people involved in understanding the data. And a big part of this is the storytelling piece for that digital storytelling, where this is the way that humans really understand things. And I'm reminded actually of like the talk that Glenn just gave, where he gave that wonderful illustration of like, do you want to live next to a parking lot, or do you want to live next to like live next to a woodland? And that, to me, like just the imagery there and everything is something that really connects with me and is something that I'm going to be remembering well past the presentation that he gave, just that imagery. And this is the way that humans are evolved to really understand things. So I clicked into an area where, there we go, there's my next slide. So that storytelling piece is such an important component of communication with data. So here's an illustration from a Rudyard Kipling story that maybe you've heard. The story here is that in the past, elephants didn't have trunks, and there was a young elephant who went down to a river and started having a conversation with a crocodile. And the crocodile said, "I have a secret to tell you, lean in." So the elephant leaned in, the crocodile grabbed his nose and started pulling. And the elephant and the crocodile are having this tug of war, and the elephant's nose keeps stretching and getting longer and longer. And eventually, when the elephant pulls free, he has a trunk. So this is the type of story that throughout human history we have used to make sense of the world. And often these are children's stories that help children make sense of the world. But honestly, these types of stories are the type of thing that are very useful for adults as well. It's a complex world. We're all trying to make sense of it, and the the power of storytelling is one of the key ways that we do make sense of the world that we're in. Another example here can be, the constellations, right? You can imagine people looking up at the sky years and years ago, and seeing the stars, not knowing what they were, but creating stories to explain what was happening in the skies above them. I love the quote on this slide here as well, about humans thinking in stories rather than facts and numbers or equations, and how the simpler the story is, the better. A lot of times when you're trying to tell a complex story with data, it's difficult to boil it down to a simple story, but I think that that's an important approach to keep in mind. So for us, we talk about combining art and design and data for action, and art really is this pathos piece that it is the emotional connector that brings people in, inspires interests, and drives the engagement and connection that people are going to need with the story that you're trying to tell and the message you're trying to communicate. Design can be that presentation piece. So when design is intuitive, when what you're presenting is intuitive, then it can be successful at communicating complex things. And data is the piece that, again, provides the foundation for everything for these informed narratives. But as we were talked about earlier, there's so much data that a lot of times it can kind of take an outsized role and cause those, the four different headspaces that I showed earlier of people feeling overwhelmed. One of the things when dealing with water and communication about water stories is there's a deep uncertainty, especially out here in the American West. I mean, I know that that's true in the East as well, but we're dealing pretty frequently with an uncertain future of like when are we going to be running out of water, which years, and what do we need to do to prepare for that? But I think that uncertain future is one of the pieces that can make storytelling with data difficult. I used to work for a biotech firm that used CRISPR technology to develop cancer therapeutics, and the scientists would come in and they would have a review of one of the experiments that they'd run. And it felt like every experiment was a step on a rung on a ladder as you're getting closer and closer to improved understanding of what you're trying to understand. But sometimes with environmental issues, the future, there's so much uncertainty in the future that it feels like you don't really have a lot of historic data that you can build on, and that can make things difficult, especially when you're really trying to narrow the data down. So I'll talk here a little bit about a couple of the tools that we've built that kind of illustrate this combination of data and art and design. I'll skip over a little bit of these slides just for time's sake, but in the Colorado River Basin, the Bureau of Reclamation was needing a tool for managing the Glen Canyon Dam and the Hoover Dam, and that's very important for this whole region, the whole Colorado River Basin. So we worked with them to develop a site. You can see these illustrations here. This is an illustration of the Hoover Dam, I believe, that was hand-drawn and part of a site that we built for them. And one of the concerns here was the deep uncertainty of the future, and what we're trying to help Bureau of Reclamation plan out with their users 30-year plan that's going to last 30 or 50 years into the future. So that can be very difficult. But we worked with the Bureau of Reclamation to develop a free web tool that allows users to create their own operating guidelines for those two dams. This generated a lot of data. So back to those earlier slides, right? At a much smaller scale, but lots and lots of data. We had 5.4 terabytes of data, millions of different records, and we used art and data to help inspire action. And I've got a screenshot here to kind of show that, where this is just one example of a plot. And one of the things I want to call out from this is that the things that are being plotted here are the number of recreational sites that are open at Lake Powell, the number of recreation sites open or percentage open at Lake Mead, and the overall rafting economic value. So kinds of ties into similar types of things that Glenn was talking about, right? Where it's like we're trying to put people into a world that they can understand. There are other things that this same tool can graph out and show potential futures for. But those things, some of those things are very technical and difficult for a regular user to understand or to relate to. But some of these things are more relatable and more something that people can imagine themselves in those shoes. Some other tools that we've created, we have a Colorado River Solutions Calculator. This is a very basic tool, and you can see this illustration on the right is a very simplified view of the Colorado River Basin. On the left, we've got an example of some very simple controls. So really trying to take a complex system and boil it down with art to make it understandable and digestible for people and not overwhelm them and overload them. And there's a tool that we're launching with the state of New Mexico that I put in here. I wanted to include this screenshot. The site officially launches on Monday, but this is a site we've been working with them on. And I like this slide or this portion of the site because it talks about climate resilience, which can be a very complicated issue. It's kind of difficult to tell, I know, at this resolution, but we have this illustration that shows different landscapes and different things that are being affected there. So that's just a small example, but if you want to go to that site, it is a site that the Interstate Stream Commission that we worked with in New Mexico, they have a really strong want and desire to use beautiful art to tell stories and tell the story that they're trying to tell. So it's a great example, both the water tabbed on Mainstream and their main site as well. So those are a couple of examples of putting it in action and kind of hopefully turning it from a TED Talk into something that is maybe a little bit more applicable. And the final point here that I'd like to leave with is that stories can create empathy, and empathy can lead to collective action. And I think that that's a really important point when you're considering the amount of data and the audience you're trying to reach and how to present that data and how to win them over, maybe in some cases by using less data and using more storytelling. So that's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dakota. Yeah, if the speakers could pop their cameras back on and we can open it up for questions. You can either raise your hand, you can put it in the chat, your questions you might have, or feel free to just unmute and ask your question. I can get us going here. There was one comment here. I just wanted to make sure Elizabeth saw that the Rivers Unlimited are collecting some citizen science data upstream and downstream of the Great Miami River. And if you want to do any data sharing, they put the link there, just so I want to alert you to that. Also,
yes, I saw. Thank you so much.
Yes, I also want to share out the Ohio Watershed data platform that we have here at Ohio University for citizen science called My Backyard Stream. And, you know, for the Cincinnati area, we have 3 entries. So there's lots of potential there for data sharing on that. That's, I'll say, kind of in line with what Dakota is saying. It's not super heavy on the protocols and data, but it emphasizes the photos. So if you're a citizen scientist, you're going out and collecting some of the data and maybe using some of the tools, Elizabeth, that you're sharing, it's real important for those photos because those photos can tell a lot for the user on the other end of what this stream looks like, what maybe some of the impacts or some of the preservation or the beautiful scenery there with our streams. And so that can be shared and populated. It's free. There's a citizen science button in the upper left-hand corner. They can click that. They upload their picture and upload any observations that they make. And this is used by our educators throughout the state to share real data, real live data from across the state with their students in their classroom. I will drop that link in the chat if others are interested in using that as a platform to encourage their citizen science participants to share their data on a public platform. Okay, Glenn, so what's the county that in Ohio that's not getting the benefit of all of this wonderful work with the wetlands from H2 Ohio?
I don't know off the top of my head. I'm gonna have to check,
Okay.
get back to you. Sorry.
Okay. Um, Dakota, there's a question here for you. Can you share the links to the examples you referenced towards the end of your presentation?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll drop those in. The first one, you do have to create an account. You can create one for free, but that Bureau of Reclamation tool, it has like a login for that. But feel free to create an account if you want to dive deeper into that one. The other two do not, so I'll drop those three in.
Okay. Anyone on the call here today that has examples of how they have used data in a storytelling format to engage with their communities that want to share some of the work that they're doing? Okay.
Hello, this is Michael Miller. Can you hear me?
Yes.
The Mill Creek Alliance and MSD in Cincinnati have used Google Story to tell visual stories about water for public use. So we're actively doing that. They're both available, one on the Mill Creek Alliance website and one on the MSD website. I could also say that uh, we have 4 water quality groups that on the same day of the month, 9 months out of the year, monitor uh, 8 water quality parameters on the same day, collected within a couple hours of one another at about 230 sites in Hamilton and Butler counties. And it's a huge data set. We're many of them going for 10 to 15 years. We're attempting to, get some synthesis out of this, getting professional personnel that have the skills to do that for volunteer organizations, though, is proving extremely difficult. But we're collaborating with OKI and with the Hamilton County Conservation a district to attempt to do this in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. I see Lisa, you have your hand up.
Yes, hi. Lisa Brown here at Watersheds of South Pittsburgh. We did an economic flooding study for our watershed, in particular a section within the city of Pittsburgh. And this was an extensive use of data. We had used a variety of data sources to look at the value of properties that are along our stream, the uses of those properties, the number of people that these businesses employ, what their contribution is to the regional GDP and their tax base, in order to look at the issues that we have around buildup along our floodplains, along our streams, and what that means in the long run. We see that we've had, for the most part, in our urban areas, areas along our streams, there's a tremendous amount of disinvestment. Areas that could have been, if there had been proper planning, these areas could have been those park and forested areas rather than parking lots. This particular watershed has 28 used car lots in a 4.5 mile stretch. And so essentially we have a giant parking lot right up against our stream. And so these are the kinds of things that I think that data can be used. We've used this in numerous presentations to tell the story of not just Sawmill Run, but, hundreds and hundreds of similar watersheds throughout our country and our region.
Thank you, Lisa. Glenn, Dakota, or Elizabeth, any response there for similar use of that platform or?
Yeah, I think the Sawmill Run flood economic study was a fantastic piece of work because it used modeling as well to understand exactly what was threatened. And as Lisa said, it combined both those non-market benefits and ambitions around MBS or park development with the economic value, the taxes and the land use. So I think telling both parts of those stories or using both types of data is important. We find that valuation of non-market benefits, you get a different reception sometimes depending on the ideology of the person listening. Things like recreation and the ripple effect of spending is more bipartisan. But yeah, I really like that study, Lisa, and I think your partners did a good job of picking out both sides.
Thank you, Glenn.
All right, any other questions, comments? There's lots of links here in the chat that you can follow up on. I'm sharing here our winter webinar series is January, February, and March. We always reserve our March webinar series for students that are doing research in the basin, and we call it Student Voices. So our March webinar is March 25th, again from noon to 1. We have 3 students one from Ohio University, one from Youngstown State University, and Kent State that will be presenting on the research they've been doing in the Muskingum Watershed Conservancy District watersheds. So we kind of picked a focus area, and these students are doing independent research from these different institutions that they'll be sharing that day. So please come and support our early career interests from our student bodies here that are interested in doing work in the Ohio River Basin and water quality. If you have any questions or ideas for future webinars, feel free to email me, and I thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.